Hello everybody, my name is Dave Whipple and you're watching Bushradical. In this video we're going to take a quick look at the Ruixin Pro knife sharpener. This is just a knife sharpening system that they sell on eBay. The price seems to keep going down. I bought this one for $22. We're going to take a look at the first impressions that I got out of it, at least when I first got it, put it together, and then we're going to try to use it on a couple knives and see what kind of results it produces. Stay tuned. So this is the Ruixin Pro. Comes with the jig, comes with 4 stones, also comes with this rod. And this is the rod that actually holds the moving stone at a specified angle. The idea here is this little tab acts as a clamp. It clamps the knife blade in the jig so it's held tight. One of my first impressions of this whole operation here is how fiddly it is. All these parts and pieces are held on with just a little bit of a screw tension, and it is incredibly fidgety. You almost have to have an extra hand to make this thing work. Everything on this knife sharpener moves. Everything slides, everything has adjustment to it, and well, it kind of ends up being really fiddly in the end. I'll also mention that this came with no instructions of how to put it together or instructions of how to use it. I don't know that they all come that way, but this one did. The whole idea here is that this swivel apparatus, this is what the rod runs through, and this rod here adjusts the height. So you slide the one through the other, and there your stone rests on your blade. This can swivel, it can move left and right, it can move up and down. In regards to this swivel piece, this locking barrel is going to lock onto the post, and it's going to stay stationary, but the cage can move, and also the swivel can move. So it's supposed to give it an articulating motion, and you can adjust this to whatever height you need it. So this is basically what the jig looks like when it's set up to sharpen a knife. Now of course you're supposed to start with a heavier grit and work up to a finer grit. I believe the grit we have in here right now is a 600. This will be enough to give us some idea. This being a first impressions video, we're not going to go too far into this apparatus, but I will say a few things. This cage has plenty of slop to it. The cage is milled at an angle so that it can be pulled out of the mold that it was, this pot metal die cast mold. The barrel is fairly true, one side to the next, but the cage, the inside of the cage is at an angle. So it's never going to get tight on that barrel. So there's slop in this cage to start with. There's also a bit of slop in this articulating little drum here that the rod slides in. So there's 2 places right here that have slop right off the bat. Also this center joint, unless you got it tight and epoxied it, it's going to have slop to it. You can't really seem to get the slop completely out of it. And as soon as you start moving it, it will want to work its way loose, and then there's more slop. So this is basically my take on this thing right from the get-go, is that even though it holds the angle somewhat well, I mean, you can see that's a degree or 2 right there that it's not perfect. So there's slop right there. As soon as this rod gets a little bit loose, it has a slop all of its own, and it will actually contribute to the slop to make it even sloppier. Okay, so far we've kind of established that it's a little fidgety. Every part's got enough slop that it can add up to a substantial amount of sloppiness. I think it can be made to function well with the design that it's kind of been built on, but I don't think it comes that way. The jig itself is fairly solid. The upright bar that holds the little articulating cage setup, that bar is pretty solid too. The clamp is just a fidgety nightmare, but I think with a little bit of tweaking, it can probably do what it was built to do fairly well. So in a following video, I'm going to go through each part and piece and try to improve it without spending any money. Maybe just a little bit of hand milling on some of these parts. maybe a little bit of epoxy to lock things up tight. Let's see what it can do as is. All right, let's give it a shot. That looks about right. I would also say that this handle on the end, it's kind of hokey. A little bit of WD-40 in a spray bottle. Just gonna give it a little something. All right, let's give it a try. The other thing is, I've seen in other videos where people have taken this jig and built a base for it and screwed it down, and that's really what it needs. Or it needs to be stationary. It has screw holes, it's meant to be stationary, but if you just put it together and use it as a countertop thing, it kind of sucks because it has no size and it's hard to keep it really steady. All right, I'm going to change. I'm going to go to this 1500 grit. And then I'll flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So I'm afraid if I change, I think using this tool for any amount of time, you probably get the idea of what it really needs to be. You know, correct. Probably should get that clamp right about in the middle of the blade. Take my rod and we'll switch back to our 600 for the other side. And then we'll go to our 15. I think if this was a one-piece rod, that'd be something that could be an improvement right off the bat. Bit of slurry here. Wipe this guy off. Wipe off the stone. A little bit more stuff on the stone. All right, what do we got here? I would say this knife is fairly sharp. Right through this area, it's really not all that sharp, but I can tell that there are areas that the very edge of the blade never got hit. This is a very old knife, and it needs a lot more work than I was giving it time for. Down here on the end, where it's obviously been hit on both sides, it's actually it's quite sharp. And you can tell that has a pretty good bite to it now. That's much better. So this is the Ruixin Pro. This is just my first impressions after having tried it one time. I would say it's getting the knife sharp. I need to give it more time than what I did give it. I think it has potential. I think there is too much play in this end. I think this two-piece rod is kind of a crappy idea because it allows it to flex here in the center, and it does, and you can really feel that. So as opposed to the whole idea of keeping a perfect angle, it can't keep a perfect angle. This guy has a lot of play. In a future video, I'm going to go through all the mods to this sharpener that I see as a possibility, and we'll see if it does anything to improve its performance. Right now, I can't stand how fidgety it is. I think there's too many parts that move, and the ones that move, they move farther than they need to. But on the parts of that knife that got sharpened down fully to where you're completely down to a fresh edge, the knife is fairly sharp. So the Ruixin Pro, first impressions, it's stupid fidgety. I think it's got the right idea. The stones seem to be decent quality. There's probably 5 or 6 or 7 mods I'd really like to do to see if this thing could be a really good knife sharpener for 22 bucks. And we'll do that in a future video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and checking out this first impressions and initial review of the Ruixin Pro knife sharpener. Feel free to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell next to it to let you know when I post videos, which I try to do quite often. My name's Dave Whipple, and you've been watching Bushradical. Be radical, eh? See you soon.